Hi, I'm Matthew from The Critics, still with our trial and still going solo, and this week I'm doing my review of the latest Ice Age number 5, if you can believe it, Ice Age Collision Course, which really could have been called the Ice Age version of The Father of the Bride, because kind of the main story, despite it being called Collision Course, seems to revolve around Manny and his relationship with Peach, who's his daughter, or Peaches, sorry, and her getting married and potentially moving out. And if I'm describing the plot of Father of the Bride, that's because it really kind of is, and it really kind of ends the same way, and the same turbulence and the same come together, and the resolution and everything. So you kind of know where it's going before it even gets started. And that's really the main character story. Which is very different from what we started off as Ice Age fans. There's very little, unfortunately, of Diago in this story. He's sort of there, and his love interest, they have a issue about being too scary and scaring off children if they can have children, but that kind of automatically resolves itself by the end. Sid's there doing his normal thing, but that isn't really given as much credence as before, and he kind of meets someone, and that seems to get resolved again, just because it seems like it kind of had to. The rat's still around, Scratch, but I think it's Scratch, but he takes up a lot of time and becomes quite annoying later on. But that all being so, I think that's kind of the problem. And then we also get Buck's stories in here as well. And then we also have these new villains, these winged dinosaurs, who also have family conflict resolutions that also get resolved in a father and son issue there. And if that sounds like a lot to fit into a movie and I haven't even talked about the collision part yet and that plot, that's because it is. And I think that's probably the downfall of this movie. I think it's definitely better than number 4. I think there's some really good comedy moments in there. Really, if I'm honest, carried by Granny, so Sid's Gran, who has some amazing moments and is given the screen time that character deserves, and a really good job there. But that's kind of really it. Scratch becomes quite annoying. He becomes something that creates convenience for the plot, which isn't particularly good. But as I was saying, it is a lot funnier, but having said that, there's also moments where the comedy just falls really badly and doesn't work. And there is a plot, there is an adventure, they do go on it, it does get resolved very conveniently. A lot of things happen conveniently, I think, is the best way to describe the plot in this movie. Things just sort of happen and they just sort of work out and it sort of ends right. And that's not particularly satisfying to someone watching it. And also because there's just so many stories going on, you can't really ever get invested in one. You're just getting invested in a story and then it's swapped to somebody else's story. And because none are really resolved, I guess the Manny and Peach's stories kind of resolved pretty well and dealt with the best. But because it is Father of the Bride, and if you've seen it or even heard of Father of the Bride, you know exactly what you're expecting. It's not exactly the most thrilling plot, especially when you come in to watch about Collision and the end of the world. But I think the humor's still there, and I think that's pretty good. I also sort of get the feeling during this movie that a lot of the characters or the actors kind of aren't as invested as before. I think that's especially true of Manny. I think it's especially true of Diago, although he hasn't really given much to do in this movie. And I think other characters, I think Buck carries this movie more than anyone. So the weasel that they meet in Age of Extinction. And then I think Granny carries it. And so when you have two peripheral characters kind of carrying the movie, Granny carrying the humour side and Buck carrying the plot and keeping things going, it's problematic because you're not focusing really on your main characters and on their storylines, and a lot of things get lost along the way, and we're not taken with it. And Diago's a cool character, and you just don't see him in this movie, which is quite sad. But obviously, I mean, it's beautifully animated. There's still some story there. There are still some very genuinely funny moments in the movie. Definitely laughed, although I also cringed. But I think ultimately the fact that there's too many plots going on, the fact that the plots just didn't get resolved conveniently and unnecessarily so. I mean, there's scenes where Scratch does something in outer space and it impacts and helps the characters or changes the momentum of the story on Earth, and it just didn't need that. I mean, there's a scene where they're in a cloud and there's like a storm and there's lightning, and that gets created by Scratch, and what you're thinking is, well, that could have happened anyway. You didn't need him to influence it from his alien spaceship. In fact, you just wasted time by going to the alien spaceship and throwing and forcing us to see the same humor from him that we've constantly always have seen throughout all of these movies. It's funny as an opening, it's funny to get the story started and to get the ball rolling. It really does get enough near the end, and we really are invested in these characters. This is the 5th movie. This should be coming about the characters, not about the hijinks anymore, and so I think that was quite sad to see. And you could see it in some of the performances. Definitely not Manny's strongest performance. And he's meant to be the character that leads us, and he just didn't in this movie. And I don't necessarily blame him. So overall, should you watch it? Look, it's definitely better than number 4. It's nowhere near as good as the first. There's other better movies out there to watch. If you really want to watch it and you want a bit of a laugh and not to be thinking hard about anything, it's a good option for DVD, but I don't know if I'd recommend going out and watching it in the cinemas. But overall, where do I place it? How many thumbs? Yeah, half, probably. Half 1. Somewhere in that sort of region. It really depends. If you're an Ice Age diehard, then you're obviously going to watch it. If you are just someone who wants to enjoy good animation, you're going to get good animation. If you want something that's got a bit of plot and a bit more substance, you're going to be very disappointed, I'm afraid. Even if you just after humor, as I said, it's there, but it's not carried by the main characters, and there's moments where it fails quite painfully to watch. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. If you've liked this video, please click like or subscribe to our channel to see more. You can also see what we're doing on our social media, so that's our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr. All of those links are in the description box below. I'm Matthew from The Critics, and this has been my review of Ice Age Collision Course.